I grew up with Robin. The day his father forced him to get engaged to me, his first love tragically died in a car accident while on her way to meet him. After the engagement, he spent his nights hopping between nightclubs, letting rumors about us fly freely. It made me the biggest joke in the circle. When I confronted him, Robin just sneered. Since she was willing to sacrifice a life just to marry me, you might as well suffer in silence now. Then came the unexpected. Both Robin and I were suddenly reborn to the night before our engagement. Without hesitation, he took his first love's hand and publicly broke off our engagement. Later, I announced that the engagement would still go ahead as planned. Robin coldly informed me. A forced marriage won't work. I won't attend the engagement party. I fell silent, conflicted about whether I should tell him now that my new fiancé was his uncle. I was stunned, staring at the familiar scene in front of me. Robin's grandfather, seated in the center, slowly spoke up. Considering you're about to graduate from college, it's the right time to set the date for your engagement. It was only then that I realized I had been reborn. Before I could sort through my chaotic thoughts, a familiar voice interrupted me. I don't agree. Robin's expression was cold, and he said something completely different from the last time. I have someone I like, but it's not Bella. He glanced at me. This marriage won't happen. Suddenly, I understood. I wasn't the only one who had been reborn. His grandfather, barely holding back his anger, demanded. What gives you the right to speak to me like this? Robin casually looked at me and spoke in an even more casual tone. I already told you I don't like you. Why are you insisting on marrying me? Are you desperate? The next second, his grandfather slammed his hand on the table. Rogue. Robin stood up slowly and said. You want me to marry her, don't you? Isn't it just so you can have children with blood from both families? He laughed, his tone almost mocking. Otherwise, should I take her to a hotel tonight? If she gets pregnant, then I won't have to marry her, right? Robin had successfully infuriated his grandfather. His grandfather threw the water cup at Robin's forehead, hitting him hard. Robin let out a self-deprecating laugh. Before leaving, he cast a casual glance at me. Belle, go bring him back. Robin's grandfather panted heavily and spoke to me with difficulty. Under the urging of the others, I had no choice but to step outside with them. My original intention was to head straight back to school. But as I stepped out of the restaurant, I bumped into Robin and his first love, Crystal. What do you want now? Robin stood motionless, protecting Crystal behind him, his gaze distant as he looked at me. In my past life, Crystal had received an anonymous text, which told her that Robin and I were about to be engaged. She ran out immediately and had the accident. Robin had always believed that the text was sent by me. I spoke in an official tone. Grandpa wants you to go back. Crystal anxiously tugged at his sleeve. Don't go. Robin patted her head soothingly before turning to me and saying. I've already made it clear. I won't marry you. His eyes showed clear impatience. And please, don't bother me anymore. His firm stance almost made me breathe a sigh of relief. In this life, we wouldn't be tied together again. My feelings for Robin had already been exhausted in my past life, each time he humiliated me in public while holding other women. I tried to walk around them and return to school first. But Crystal called me. Bella, can you promise me something? I stopped. Promise what? She bit her lip uneasily. Promise you'll never bother Robin again. I accidentally saw your diary once. Didn't it say you liked Robin? Crystal's voice was soft, yet her tone was determined. Now that I'm Robin's official girlfriend, I'm asking you to stay away from him, and I hope you understand. I stepped closer and stared at her. You snooped through my stuff? In high school, I always kept my diary locked in a drawer. Crystal stepped back, looking somewhat shy. I just happened to see it. Robin frowned and stood protectively behind her. Enough, Bella. She didn't do it on purpose. He spoke in a low, calming tone. There's no need for her to promise anything. I don't like her. It's a waste of time for her to keep bothering me. With that, he turned to leave with Crystal. That diary contained many unspoken confessions of my secret crushes. How could she just go through my things so casually without permission? I rushed after them and grabbed Crystal's arm. "Don't you owe me an apology?" Crystal bit her lip, stubbornly responding. "I don't think I did anything wrong." I laughed bitterly. "Did your parents teach you that it's okay to snoop through other people's stuff?" Apparently, that comment hit too close to home. As soon as I finished speaking, her eyes turned red, and she looked like she was about to cry. "Enough, Bella," Robin growled, pulling my hand off of Crystal. The next second, the traffic light turned green, and a car came speeding towards us. There was no time to dodge, and Robin, perhaps driven by the trauma of the past life, instinctively pulled Crystal out of the way. The screeching of the brakes was deafening. Luckily, I only got a minor scrape on my ankle and fell to the ground. "Crystal, are you okay?" Robin held Crystal, checking her over like it was a matter of life and death. They were so absorbed in each other that they didn't even notice the driver angrily driving off. Once Robin confirmed Crystal was fine, he finally came to his senses and noticed me trying to stand up. Under the dim street lights, I looked up and locked eyes with Robin. After a long silence, he suddenly chuckled. He asked with some curiosity, "Do you think this is karma?" He had always believed that Crystal's accident in the past life was my doing, even though I had explained it countless times. I turned my gaze away from the couple and forced myself to stand up, ignoring the pain. I dusted myself off. At least now, I didn't care for him anymore. And I wouldn't feel hurt over it. Afterward, Robin's grandmother repeatedly invited me to their home. She tried to convince me not to hold a grudge against Robin. No matter what I said, she acted as though she couldn't hear it. "He's become so headstrong that no one can control him except his little uncle." Robin's little uncle. Vincent. The real power behind their family. My only connection with him was probably from a year ago, when I got drunk and kissed a strange man sitting at the next booth during a game of Truth or Dare. The next time we met, Robin introduced Vincent as his uncle, and I almost wished I could disappear into the ground. As his grandmother continued talking, a glint of something untrustworthy flashed in her eyes. She clapped her hands together and murmured, "That's it." I still hadn't understood what she meant. Until a week later, when I was tricked into going to their family's hotel. Drenched from the rain, I was handed a room key. "Go upstairs and wait. Someone will bring you clean clothes." When I opened the door and turned on the lights, I froze. The unusual scent in the room hit me immediately. A man, his tie hanging loosely over his shirt, leaned against the bed, not even bothering to lift his head. His voice was raspy and filled with irritation. "Get out." It was Vincent. Immediately, I realized what the smell was. I turned to open the door, but it wouldn't budge, clearly locked from the outside. "What's going on?" I said, "Get out. Don't you understand?" His voice was growing impatient. "God. I also want to go out." "It's not that I don't want to go out. I just can't open the door." I desperately continued twisting the handle, softly protesting. Vincent paused, then footsteps approached. "Why are you here?" He grabbed my arm, turning me to face him. That's when I felt the warmth of his hand, making me shiver slightly. "Uncle." "Vincent." I called him honestly, trying to remind him of who I was. Vincent didn't respond, just lowered his brow and stared at me. "I heard Robin broke off the engagement with you?" I nodded, unsure why he was asking this now. It seemed like he stepped even closer, his Adam's apple bobbing slightly. "So, you don't like him anymore?" Unconsciously, I inhaled deeply, a little slow to react. I pushed aside all the complicated thoughts and answered slowly. "No, I don't." He gave a half-hearted smile, his tone not really questioning. "Is that so?" I slowly looked up, feeling awkward and exposed as I met his gaze. The temperature in the air rose slightly, a sense of restlessness mixed in. I couldn't quite place the feeling of suffocating heat. Instinctively, I sought a way to relieve it. "Vincent." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. He raised his hand, casually brushing my cheek. "Feeling uncomfortable?" I didn't answer, my attention fixated on his lips, now so close to mine. I wondered if they would feel as cool as jelly taken straight out of the fridge. "Talk." Vincent's eyes held shifting emotions, but his rational words only made me feel like the impatient one. I stood on tiptoe, reaching for his shoulder. But then his phone rang, interrupting the moment. Vincent clicked his tongue and was about to toss it aside. But when he saw who was calling, he stopped and answered. "Uncle, you're back in the country?" It was Robin. I snapped out of my daze for a moment. I looked up at Vincent, but my intention to kiss him froze. Vincent responded briefly, then pressed his other hand into my lower back, pushing me closer to him. The distance between us closed again. Our lips were nearly touching. "Where are you now?" "I'll come find you." Robin's voice came through the phone. I panicked for a second, grabbing his shirt and accidentally knocking into his collarbone. Vincent hissed quietly. "Can you be gentler?" I mumbled an apology, dazed. "I didn't mean to." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. "Who are you talking to?" "I feel like I've heard that voice before." I stared at him in panic, my eyes wide. Vincent dropped the phone with a brief, "Your aunt," before hanging up. But my focus wasn't on that. I had completely lost my sense of awareness, and my mind was consumed by the person in front of me. Vincent picked me up and started walking inside. As he walked, he casually asked, "You want to do something?" He sat on the edge of the bed and pulled me onto his lap. I nodded eagerly, wanting to kiss him. Vincent turned his head, smiling, and squeezed my chin, stopping me. "I'm too old for the kind of games where you eat and run." "Oh." He's only 6 years older than me, and he's already talking like he's ancient. "So, if you don't take responsibility, I will definitely call the cops." "Got it?" I felt like I was standing under a plum tree, parched, staring at the tempting, sweet plums. But staring at the plums won't quench my thirst. Unless I get to taste one. After some more persuading, the plum finally reached my lips. I kissed it gently, but due to my hesitation, I pulled away immediately. Vincent instinctively followed, but stopped just before our lips touched. "Stop being so half-hearted or you won't get another kiss." His voice, smooth yet slightly teasing, carried an undertone of temptation. "Open your mouth, come closer." I wrapped my arms around his neck, closing in again. But this time I couldn't pull away so easily. If he kept at it, I'd have no way to escape. On the other side, Robin had hung up the phone and was arriving at the door. He was still thinking about the woman's voice he had heard on the call earlier. It sounded so familiar. He pushed open the door, lost in thought. Grandma, sitting on the couch eating an apple, looked at him like she'd seen a ghost. "Ah. What are you doing here?" "I had no classes today, so I came to see you." That's when she noticed something was off. She quickly took out her phone and checked. That's when she realized the message she had sent to Robin had somehow ended up with Vincent. Over an hour had passed. Her mind went blank. She had planned to invite Robin to a hotel, but ended up sending the invitation to. "You should stop trying to match me with Bella." Robin was prepared for his grandmother's long lecture. But this time, she stayed silent for a long while, before finally agreeing. "I plan to try and match Bella with your uncle." Robin froze for a moment, his fingers halting in their movement on the phone. It was hard to describe the feeling that hit him. In his past life, he had been entangled with Bella for years, subconsciously seeing her as his fiancée. His property. Now hearing that she might marry someone else, he felt inexplicably irritable. So, he just half-heartedly helped Bella reject the idea. "That won't work. Your uncle doesn't like Bella, and Bella has someone else she likes." Grandma scoffed. "Aren't you in love with Crystal? Why do you care so much?" "I even planned to visit Crystal once you two were engaged, to tell her about it, so she could give up." Robin froze. His phone slipped from his hand. "What did you say?" Wait, that message wasn't really from Bella? What he didn't know was that his uncle was currently playing hard to get with me. Vincent, the Vincent I knew, was always quiet. I didn't understand the meaning behind the string of questions and conversations. He pried my hands from the pillow, lacing his fingers with mine. Looking down at me from above, he asked, "Who am I?" I avoided answering. So, he forced me to look at him. Drops of sweat dripped from his hairline. His bright eyes were especially alluring at that moment. He asked slowly, "Want to look in the mirror?" I had no choice but to comply. Vincent. Say it again." Vincent. How pathetic. Why couldn't I just fall asleep like in the novels? Why do I have to face all of this awake? Thankfully, I was facing away from Vincent, preparing to play dead. Stop pretending, I know you're awake. His soft voice shattered the facade I had worked so hard to maintain. I didn't panic. I closed my eyes, pretending to be completely out of it. Vincent chuckled softly. Forget it. Let's continue. Next, I felt his grip on my ankle. I immediately jerked awake, my eyes snapping open. Awake now? He looked down at me. Heat began to spread from my ears. I bit my lip and stayed silent. Vincent got up, casually wrapping his bathrobe. He walked over to the desk and turned on his phone. A few seconds later, he turned the screen toward me. I saw the large emergency number on the screen, and my blood pressure spiked. He was almost smiling. Remember what I said before? Was he going to report me for freeloading? Just as I was contemplating how to respond, the door suddenly knocked. Bella, I know you're in there. Open up, I need to talk to you. It was Robin. More trouble on the way. I stared blankly at the door, my mind a complete mess. Robin kept shouting from outside. Vincent, losing patience, furrowed his brow and directly opened the door. What is it? Why do you have to bother me now? Robin froze for 2 seconds. Why are you here? Didn't Grandma say Bella was here? At that moment, lying under the blanket, my heart sank. Even though I hadn't heard Vincent's reply yet, I had already mentally prepared for the storm that was about to come. Until. Vincent, is your girlfriend inside? Robin suddenly recalled the voice from the phone call. Maybe Grandma remembered wrong. I'll go ask Bella's house. He smiled knowingly, as if he understood. I won't disturb you guys. Say hi to her for me. Vincent shut the door, and I didn't even realize what had just happened. Did Robin just unintentionally diffuse a crisis with his lack of subtlety? Vincent walked toward me, and I hurriedly grabbed my phone, trying to look busy to avoid him bringing up what had just happened. What are you doing? I bit my lip and replied, buying medicine. Vincent raised an eyebrow. What kind of medicine? I hesitated for a second, then decided not to hide it. What do you think? A soft laugh followed from above. His lazy eyes were filled with satisfaction, but his words were sharp and mocking. Why are you taking it? I clenched the blanket, a bit irritated. Because of you. What's wrong with me? Under Vincent's expressionless gaze, a sudden, vague sense of grievance rose within me. I stopped engaging with him and lowered my gaze, continuing to search for the medicine in silence. The next second, my phone was snatched away and thrown aside. He brushed the corner of my slightly reddened eye and spoke in an unusually soft voice. Stop fussing. I've already taken it. I froze, trying to recall whether I had done so. Seeing my doubt, Vincent patiently added, every time. He then pointed at the trash bin and asked with a smile, otherwise, do you want to count them? I didn't bother counting, but fragments of memory slowly came back to me. With the help of Robin's grandmother's special perfume, I seemed like someone who'd never seen a man in her life. Vincent avoided my kiss and whispered gently. Wait. I chased after him, murmuring, I can't wait. Vincent. He took a deep breath, and his hand seemed to reach for something on the nightstand. I touched his ear again and, feeling disappointed, asked, aren't you going to kiss me? Vincent's calm demeanor finally cracked. I can't let you smell this scent anymore. I was confused. After a moment, before kissing me again, he explained, I won't be able to handle it. A series of awkward moments had already numbed me. So when Vincent suggested carrying me to the bathroom, I only hesitated for a moment. Then I reached out my hands toward him. Please. Vincent let out a small laugh, allowing me to bury my face in his neck as he walked toward the bathroom. Don't mention it. That day, Vincent asked me again if I would take responsibility for him. He saw my hesitation, but didn't pressure me to make a choice. He simply said, your father's company is having financial trouble, and Robin canceled the engagement. If nothing unexpected happens, he'll immediately start looking for a new marriage partner for you. The next morning, on the way home, I kept replaying Vincent's words in my head. However, when I ran into Robin downstairs, that conversation was temporarily forgotten. The tiredness in his eyes from staying up all night was clear, but his voice was colder than the morning fog. Care to explain why you didn't answer your phone all night and didn't come home? I averted my gaze. None of your business. After leaving the hotel yesterday afternoon and not resting, I was too tired to face my dad, so I went to the apartment under my name nearby. But there was no need to explain this to Robin. As Robin approached, the cold aura around him grew heavier. None of my business? He smiled faintly. Bella, we haven't announced the cancellation of our engagement yet. Technically, I'm still your fiancé. You not coming home all night doesn't concern me? His words sounded too familiar, like a scene from a past life. There had been another time. While I was interning, I went on a business trip with my boss for a day, without notifying anyone. The next day, I saw Robin outside my apartment building. At the time, there were still traces of lipstick on his neck. But he still angrily questioned where I had gone the previous night. The man in front of me overlapped with that memory. I looked at him, bewildered. You took Crystal in front of everyone before canceling our engagement, didn't you? Robin stared at me for a long time, his annoyance clear. He coldly smirked. Do you know what I hate most about you? His gaze was both scrutinizing and judgmental. It's that you're petty and can't hide your jealous nature. Don't you find yourself utterly pathetic, Bella? I froze for a moment. I had simply stated the facts to refute him, but to him, I was just jealous. Robin shook his head and took a step back, creating some space between us. I thought I might have misunderstood you. Now I see, even if you didn't do that thing, you're still just jealous. You can't even compare to Crystal. He threw those words at me, giving me a disappointed glance. Robin, I called out as he turned to leave. Even if I am jealous, it's not because of you. You're really ordinary, but so full of yourself. Don't ever come around me again. If you do, I'll call the cops. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked toward the apartment. Jealousy, losing composure. I had heard this countless times in a past life. From the beginning, Robin had harshly criticized me, then later mocked me lightly. Now, with all emotions stripped away, I could see things from an outsider's perspective. Looking back on everything, I realized how much time I had wasted on this endless back and forth with Robin. After that day, Robin unilaterally announced the engagement's cancellation. Vincent had been right. The next day, my dad eagerly introduced me to a new marriage prospect. I initially planned to just meet him and get it over with. But something unexpected happened right at the start. To be honest, I kind of like your type. At the restaurant, the man sitting across from me began his confession. But I couldn't join in. If I were to admit that I couldn't eat anything because of his foot odor, masked by his $30,000 shoes, he'd probably get up and leave. And then, my dad would give me a good scolding. Just as I was feeling gloomy, a familiar voice took over the conversation. Who do you like? I immediately looked up. Vincent, with his suit jacket draped over his arm, the top button of his shirt casually undone and no tie, looked slightly disheveled, an aura of someone used to the social elite's indulgences. He gave the young man an unfriendly smile and appraised him. Vincent. The man stood up quickly. What a coincidence, I'm here for a blind date. In that instant, I could feel Vincent's intense gaze above my head. If Vincent's gaze had a temperature, I felt like my scalp would have been scorched off. Do you want to join us? The man awkwardly asked when Vincent didn't leave. To my surprise, Vincent actually sat down. You two talk, I'm just here to observe, he said casually. The man. He glanced at Vincent, then turned to me, struggling to speak. Overall, I'm pretty satisfied with you. But I do have one issue, I'd like to ask you. Vincent casually poked the broccoli on his plate with a fork. I withdrew my gaze and nodded at the man. Is that still, there? He asked. I blinked. What? He clicked his tongue, a bit embarrassed. Your first time. Because I care about it. Vincent froze. My hand, hanging under the table, clenched involuntarily. An uncomfortable feeling, like being overly exposed, seemed to flood over me. Just as I was about to speak, I caught a glimpse of Vincent throwing his fork onto the table with a soft thud. What's wrong? I asked. Is it not to your liking? Should I order something else for you? Vincent asked with a chilling smile. No, I find you rather interesting, he said, studying the man with a cryptic look. A guy who sleeps with a different woman every night, how dare you ask a girl you just met to stay celibate for 20 years? The man's face flushed red, but he still thought there was nothing wrong with what he said. You don't understand, her family's situation now is pretty much the same as selling their daughter. I only lowered my standards, because she looks good. Honestly, even if I asked her to be a stay-at-home wife, raising kids and supporting her husband, she'd have no choice but to obey. I listened silently, my hand inching toward the soup in front of me. I thought that the next second, the soup would end up on his head. I had been holding back all evening, but I couldn't take it anymore. A jerk like him deserved to be kicked as far away as possible. Vincent seemed to sense my thoughts. He moved the soup away from the table, placing it in front of the man instead, and with a smile, he lightly tapped the bowl. Before the man had any time to react, Vincent swiftly grabbed his neck and slammed his face down into the bowl. A flash of disdain crossed Vincent's eyes. She doesn't even want me, and yet you think you're something? You're just a pathetic, broke man holding on to your grandfather's legacy. You piece of shit. Vincent finally released the man, who had choked on some of the soup. He slowly returned to his seat and casually wiped his hand, which had splashed some soup. Without looking up, he said, "Leave. Tomorrow, have your father come here to explain to me himself." It wasn't until the man left that Vincent finally raised his eyes to look at me. I was propping my chin up, smiling at him. The old man let out a cold laugh, clearly uncomfortable. What are you laughing at? You just slept with me, and now you're straight into a matchmaking session. I haven't even gotten to deal with you yet. Hearing him bring it up, I felt a pang of guilt. Without the man's foot odor assaulting me anymore, I regained my appetite and drank quite a bit of alcohol as I ate. By the time the bill came, I was definitely feeling tipsy. It's okay, Vincent, I'll take care of it, I said, pushing my traditional, paying the bill first virtue to the extreme. Vincent. The waiter, however, maintained excellent professionalism with a polite smile. It's okay, Miss Bella, Vincent usually just charges it directly to his card. I stopped mid-payment and blinked. Vincent didn't give me a chance to respond, striding over to my side. Can you walk on your own? I thought for a moment, then let my dignity go. Well, if you carry me, I might just agree. Vincent chuckled and, in full view of the public, bent down and lifted me up, walking out without hesitation. The familiar, crisp scent of his body enveloped me, clearing away the discomfort caused by the man's foot smell. My nose almost brushed against Vincent's collarbone, and I couldn't help but lean in and sniff again. Vincent glanced down at me and said casually, I haven't forgiven you yet, and you're already acting cute? His words were cold, but he tightened his hold on me. I felt sleepy in his arms. It wasn't until I heard a familiar voice that I stirred. Uncle? How come you're with Bella? I lazily opened my eyes from Vincent's neck, and saw Robin looking at me with a complex expression, with Crystal beside him. Vincent shot him a quick glance. Who I'm with doesn't require your approval. Robin bit his lip, his gaze lingering on Vincent's arm around me. She's drunk, right? She's always like this. Just a little alcohol and she's out. I know her, so just leave her with me. Otherwise, she might cause a scene and trouble you. I shivered at the words, glancing at Vincent, who showed no sign of letting me go, then back at Robin. Our eyes met, and I instinctively said, Scumbag. Robin. His face turned dark in an instant. His facade of power and intimidation crumbled immediately. I hurriedly wrapped my arms around Vincent's neck. Please don't let him carry me. Vincent's chest rumbled with laughter as he stepped away. When the memory chain reconnected, it was already the next morning. I rubbed my drowsy head and, as I descended the stairs, mentally prepared myself. I had been ready for a harsh scolding from my father, but when I saw him acting oddly friendly, it felt even more terrifying. Did you sleep well last night? I couldn't speak. I didn't dare to. My daughter is really something, marrying the top person in the industry. I paused for a few seconds, then asked cautiously. Are you planning to arrange for me to marry another 57-year-old old man? My father froze, laughing awkwardly for a moment. Being with Vincent really makes a difference. You went from being foolish to being cute. I was stunned. A few forgotten fragments from the previous night suddenly rushed to my mind. Vincent had taken me home and, as I struggled with my seatbelt, he leaned over to help me undo it. Just then, I suddenly looked up, my lips grazing his. Vincent didn't move. His eyes slowly shifted from mine down to my nose. The heavy breaths in the confined space became a sweet, growing tension. Just when I thought Vincent was about to do something, he suddenly pushed my chin up, creating distance between us, and gave me a mocking smile. I'm not giving you a second chance to take advantage of me without any commitment. The alcohol had stirred up my flirtatious side. I looked at Vincent's lips, pouting in disappointment. I remembered that this old man really knew how to kiss. Vincent, perhaps to prevent me from kissing him, walked me home with extreme restraint, his hand barely touching me. When my father saw Vincent, he was surprised but quickly plastered a smile on his face. I couldn't recall what they said. The only thing I remembered was Vincent leaning in close to my ear, his voice low so only I could hear. Agree to marry me, and I'll let you kiss me. Seemingly worried that I might refuse, he added another incentive. You can kiss me as much as you want. Was he treating me like a fool? The words marriage shook me back to a moment of clarity. Tonight, Vincent helped me get rid of the man, and it stirred something inside me. What's more, my father was forcing the marriage for his own benefit, and I had no way out. In the end, in front of everyone, I agreed to marry Vincent, feeling absolutely clear-headed. Yes, it was a political marriage. To me, even though some affection was involved, I still defined it as a compromise, a decision made after weighing the pros and cons. It wasn't until much later, when I saw everything Vincent did for me was an act of love, that I realized. Perhaps if it had been a little later, or if I had a choice, the outcome might have been different. But ultimately, in any circumstance, I ended up falling in love with Vincent and marrying him. Robin's grandmother seemed to have her own guilty conscience. After the accidental hotel card incident, she hadn't contacted me. It wasn't until my engagement with Vincent was confirmed that she finally called me after a long time, suggesting lunch together. When I arrived, I found Robin there, and Vincent was still on his way back. She awkwardly took a few steps toward me to greet me. You're here, haha. I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable at her forced laugh. When the living room was just me and Robin, he furrowed his brows and spoke. Are you here to discuss the engagement? I nodded, not wanting to engage further. Bella, do you think you're interesting? His voice was filled with frustration. I stared at him, not understanding. I admit, I think I like you a bit now. But if you and the elders are pressuring me into marriage, it's only going to backfire. Do you get it? I was stunned and couldn't find my voice. Robin stood up and dusted off his hoodie. He looked down at me, still wearing that unapproachable attitude. Pressuring me into marriage won't work. If I don't go to the engagement party, it's you who's going to lose face. I silently opened my mouth, then closed it again. This was his home. It didn't feel right to curse him out now. Robin's smug pride finally shattered at the dinner table. With a crisp sound of chopsticks dropping, Robin's eyes flickered. What are you guys talking about? Uncle and Bella are getting engaged? He laughed absurdly for a moment. Don't joke around. They're not even from the same generation. Vincent, as if it was a given, gave a casual You two won't be from the same generation much longer. Remember, she's going to be your future little aunt. I was still debating whether to give Robin a loving, tolerant look as an elder when he pushed his bowl aside, put on a serious face, and retreated to his room. Vincent had a few drinks that night. As soon as he got into the car, he had the driver put up the partition. Alarm bells went off in my head immediately. I was about to test the waters with a question when Robin interrupted, chasing after us. Are you sure you want to marry her? Vincent lazily leaned back in his seat, pressing the window down. Robin leaned over him, looking straight at me. His eyes were filled with scorn, as if he had already predicted my inevitable collapse. You probably don't know this, but the person you're about to marry once had a very, very lowly, one-sided crush on me. Vincent bit his cigarette, lowered his head, and flicked his lighter to light it. There was no visible emotion on his face. For some reason, I felt myself getting nervous. Robin was pleased with my reaction and smiled. His tone grew even more relaxed. Bella has a notebook where she wrote down everything about her secret crush on me. With your status, are you really sure you want to marry someone who once had a crush on your nephew? My hand, resting on the seat, clenched tighter with every word he spoke. After all, Robin was Vincent's nephew. The odds of him siding with me were far less than him supporting his own nephew. Especially after Vincent had let him lose face like this. Vincent's hand holding the cigarette rested on the window ledge. His wrist slightly lifted, silently signaling me to look at Robin. Robin's eyes locked with mine, and he smiled triumphantly. Did you see that, Bella? He's asking you to get out and come with me. How could he possibly want you? Vincent ignored him and instead asked me, did you hear everything he said to you? I couldn't figure out his intentions, so I just nodded silently. The light outside dimmed as the shadows overtook us. Vincent leaned in, the faintest smile curling at the corner of his lips. His voice was low, almost coaxing. Bella, don't be a coward. Fight back. I froze, raising my head in disbelief to look at him. My purpose isn't just to defend you. Likewise, I've given you the confidence to do anything you want to do. His eyes narrowed slightly, and his brows lifted just enough. Like now. Wouldn't it feel more satisfying to fight back yourself? His words stirred something inside me. Without thinking, I found myself leaning closer to the window. But just before speaking, I hesitated and turned back to confirm with Vincent. Are you really going to back me up? A soft slipped out from his nose. I bit my lip, my gaze firm as I focused on Robin. My hand, still resting on the window ledge, balled into a fist. After a strange, tense silence. Go to hell. My biggest regret in life is that damn notebook. Tomorrow, I'll buy a new one and write every curse I can think of for you in it. Robin's expression changed instantly, as if he hadn't expected Vincent to react like this. He stared at me, his face like a pool of still water. I stayed immersed in the words I had just shouted at Robin, even after the car had driven a distance. I hadn't realized that, in the heat of my anger, I had ended up leaning all the way over. If I were to think about it now, I was still essentially sitting on Vincent's lap. Feeling better? Vincent's smile was tinged with a playful, almost mocking tone. The question was ambiguous. I didn't know if he was asking about how I felt after cursing Robin or if he was referring to my current position. Just as I was about to act nonchalant and climb off, the driver hit the brakes unexpectedly. I fell straight into Vincent's arms. Something soft pressed against my back. I reached out to touch it. What are you touching? Vincent half smiled, grabbing my hand. I was still sitting on his lap, and without thinking much, I spoke. I just pressed against something really soft. It must have been the cigarette box in his pocket. Vincent slowly raised his eyes, his hand still gripping mine, now slightly warm. Are you sure that's the thing in your hand? The car was dim, almost completely dark. As I looked down to check my hand, the passing streetlights cast their glow on the seat. Everything was clear. I almost gasped in shock. In the blink of an eye, I quickly pulled my hand back. I tried to get off Vincent's lap, but he wouldn't let me, pressing his hand on my waist and pulling me back into his arms. Vincent, apparently in the mood for some late-night reckoning, asked, "You said soft?" I was on the verge of tears. No. What was it, then? Seeing that Vincent was still intent on digging into this, I instinctively placed my hand on the lower half of his face. Please, don't say anything else. Vincent didn't try to pull my hand away, but instead shifted his position, making me straddle him. You think this is going to stop me from talking? His warm breath spread across my palm, tingling, not just in my hand, but deep in my chest as well. His low voice slid through my fingers. I retracted my hand, uncertain and staring into his eyes. Vincent's expression was playful. How about we move somewhere else to stop me? The moonlight reflected off his brows and eyes, like the cold, clear pine of a mountain stream. My heart skipped a beat, threatening to rip apart the calm facade I was trying to maintain. I knew then that I had been completely seduced by him. By the time I realized it, I was already leaning in, my hands on his shoulders. Our gazes met, both drawn to each other's lips. And then, we kissed. I tried to recall the passionate kiss from that day, but this time, it was different. Maybe it was because Vincent had been drinking, but this time, he immediately took control. He held my chin with one hand and forcefully pried my mouth open, adjusting the angle as he kissed me. He even momentarily pulled away, tilting his head to the side, only to kiss me again. At one point, I briefly snapped back to my senses and pushed against his shoulder. The driver is still here. He can't hear us. Vincent's voice was slightly unsteady. Again. Before I could process what was happening, I was pulled back into his intoxicating trap. In the end, Robin didn't end up with Crystal. He told me this himself. I was at the cafe doing group work when he sat down across from me. I heard you and Vincent are getting your marriage license soon? I looked up at him. The sadness in his eyes couldn't be masked by his outwardly perfect condition. I had a dream, Bella. He laughed and shook his head. In the dream, I misunderstood you and did a lot of things that hurt you. The only comfort was that, in the dream, you still liked me. He lowered his eyes, his smile soft but bitter. Turns out dreams are really the opposite of reality. In reality, I haven't done anything to you, and you've already stopped liking me. I didn't want to argue with him about pointless things anymore. Suddenly, I remembered something and pulled out a ring with my initials engraved on it. I was about to return it to Robin when he looked at it and spoke softly. So, you two even bought matching couple rings. It was such a simple statement. Yet I felt like I didn't fully understand it. What? Robin replied, last time, I saw the same men's ring at Vincent's place, but I never expected you'd be wearing the women's version. I felt like I was submerged in the deep sea, suffocating as the sensation of drowning completely engulfed me. Robin's voice drifted from far, far away, pulling me into even further memories. In my past life, I had a faint sense that Robin had developed feelings for Crystal. Though I was disappointed, I didn't want to interfere in their relationship. I had planned to ask Robin about it at an appropriate time, but then I received a gift box from someone claiming to be the butler of their family. Inside the box was the ring. I thought it was a gift from Robin. I never imagined it was from Vincent. So that night, when Robin came to find me, I eagerly threw myself into his arms and boldly confessed, Robin, I really like you. Robin didn't push me away, and after a moment of silence, he held me back. I know, he said. And you? I lifted my head from his chest, asking with hope. Robin pressed me back into his arms, hiding his expression from me. I never said I didn't like you, he answered vaguely. The subtlety of his words was completely drowned out by the dopamine buzzing in my brain. If it weren't for that ring, it's unlikely that Robin and I would have gotten engaged. Bella? Robin's voice of doubt pulled me back to reality. My gaze fell once more on the ring, and I instinctively slipped it onto my finger. What did you call me? Robin, unaware that I was setting a trap for him, replied, Bella. I flashed him a rare smile. Just remember, you'll soon have to call me Auntie. Robin left without saying another word. I nodded in satisfaction at his retreating figure, confident he wouldn't return to bother me. I didn't ask Vincent about the ring immediately. But the question lingered in my mind, and I couldn't quite reconcile it. Clearly, he was the one who gave it to me, so why hadn't he said anything? I stared at the ring, trying to recall my past life memories of Vincent. Then I remembered the day I confessed to Robin. When I lifted my head from his chest, I had looked over Robin's shoulder and saw a Cullinan parked right in front of us. But because it was already late, I didn't have time to see who was inside before the car drove off, disappearing into the quiet autumn night. Recently, I had seen a Cullinan in Vincent's garage. I think he wasn't silent because he didn't want to speak, but because he had seen the person I loved and didn't want to bring it up again. It wasn't until the day of the engagement that Vincent finally put the ring on my finger. The engagement banquet went smoothly from start to finish. The only thing that bothered me was something a friend from my internship had said. Her husband was 7 or 8 years older than her. She looked at me with the complicated eyes of someone who'd been through it all. Be more understanding of your husband, she said, patting my shoulder. I looked at her, confused. I'm just giving you a heads up, she continued. He's older than you, and he'll get older faster. You know that, right? She didn't beat around the bush and whispered to me with a sigh. The older a man gets, the less energy he has. My husband is like that. By the time I'm just getting into the mood, he's already lying there, completely exhausted. It's even shorter than the time it takes me to read a short story. He told me, all men are like that. This was my first time hearing about such things. I was surprised, but I thought about it for a moment. I realized it wasn't a trivial issue, so I asked her earnestly, is there any way to solve it? She shook her head, blushing as she said, you can't rely on men for that. I've got an electronic partner now. I can share the link with you later. You can try it. It's definitely more effective than a real person. I thought she might have some great remedy for my health. But I didn't dwell on it further. I opened the door to leave, and Vincent just happened to be standing there. He'd probably just arrived, so I didn't think much of it. That night, at the engagement party, Vincent hardly let me drink. Anyone who came over to offer me a drink was blocked by him. But I couldn't help but look at my fiancé with stars in my eyes. My feelings for him had just skyrocketed, only to be quickly brought down to earth. At Vincent's apartment, he pinned me to the sofa. His knee pressed against my leg. He reached up and lightly tapped my cheek. Tell me, how does your electronic partner keep you company? His voice, tinged with the smoothness of alcohol, was hoarse yet sensual. I immediately realized that he had heard everything. I wasn't planning on buying one, I mumbled defensively. I just wanted to get you some supplements to keep on hand. Had I known this comment would nearly cost me my life, I would have rather admitted to using electronic products than have stupidly argued with him. Afterward, I had no idea when we had moved from the sofa to the bedroom. I buried my face in the pillow. His hand, with the same ring on it, rested on my back. As our fingers intertwined, the ring lightly brushed against mine. But soon, he flipped me over. Though I didn't want to use the word wild, at that moment, Vincent was in that exact state. Do you like electric products? He asked. My voice was nearly hoarse from crying out. Instinctively, I shook my head desperately. No, I don't. I only like you. At that moment, everything seemed to freeze, like a pirate ship suddenly coming to a halt. It was a strange feeling, being in this stillness. Really? Vincent gazed down at me. I felt a little bashful, and after a long pause, I finally met his clear eyes, which carried a faint hint of unease. I sniffled, trembling, and wrapped my arms around his neck. I choked out a response. Really? Vincent, today is the first day I've confirmed that I like you. Though it wasn't entirely accurate. If I looked back, I had liked him yesterday, a month ago, and at various points where my feelings for him had deepened. But today, I finally confessed, so I chose today as the first day I acknowledged my feelings for him. In response, Vincent kissed me deeply, a lingering kiss full of longing. When we broke for air, he whispered, but I'm not on my first day. I've liked you for a long time. The next afternoon, I sat in my study, flipping open the new journal I had prepared. I wrote yesterday's date. Then, in a fit of childish defiance, I wrote. First day of liking Vincent, nearly lost my life. Danger level slightly high. Today, I plan to reduce my feelings for him by 0.1%. If he lets me sleep a full night without any trouble, my liking for him can increase by 10%. The afternoon sunlight stretched from my ring finger to my index finger, and I finally set down my pen. Before I closed the notebook, I suddenly had a thought. I flipped back to the introduction page and carefully wrote a few words. Recording the moment of heartache. The end.